It is Monday on Raid Shadow Legends, but you knew that. Now, as with anything else in this game, throw enough mythicals or void legendaries or funny 5th anniversary man at a problem, and it will probably go away. But what if you don't have those, or you're simply just not allowed to use them for a certain piece of content? Well, the first is easily solved by just spending an absurd amount of money that you may or may not have. But the second is not quite so simple in that regard, and that's where you have to get a bit creative, or potentially a lot creative if you both don't have the champions. That would make things easy, and you won't be allowed to use them anyway. So today we're going to be harping on about 10 epics that people have kind of forgotten existed or dismissed for some reason, and this is why they are wrong. Well, not objectively wrong, but it's something to consider now, isn't it? So without harping on any longer, we'll go on to the first champion of the 10. They're all epics. They've all been out for at least a week, so obviously not the skunk. Anyone who says the skunk is underrated is silly. And that is going to be Azure. Now, before we go any further, you may want to get the spray bottle ready here, because we are going to be mentioning Cursed City quite a bit for the glorified collection of Doom Tower secret rooms that it is, and always will be until we get bored and think of something else. So regarding Azure, there are a couple really awkward rooms in late Plagueholm where you're only allowed to use HP champions or supports, and from factions that, unless you have like Sir Nicholas, some mythical, something else, you might be struggling a bit. So Azure doesn't really fit the damage part, but he does fit the CC part, because he's got this, which is, even if there's no increased speed on them, it's a 60% chance of a stun. He's going to keep your team alive pretty handily. And you have this, which also pinches bunch their turn meter, so he can go back to stunning people. Now, in terms of building him, as I said, he's not really a damage dealer, so just make him go fast, give enough accuracy to CC things with his A1 or the A3, and then some durability, and you should be fine. It might take some time, but you'll get there eventually. I have faith in you. So next champ is High Elves. Now, I remember Hady Boy said a while back that Thenasil is a mid-tier healer. I partially disagree with that, because I think that this skill is actually pretty good, especially on a 3-turn cooldown. You don't see too many of these that have both of these effects, and the heal scales off his max HP, so give him a bunch of that, a bunch of speed, hey, just like Azure. Again, this is going to be a pattern we walk into here in terms of gearing him is just HP and speed, there's not much else to it. But yeah, you could give him accuracy, because this goes up to a 50% chance of sleep, and this is a 5-turn cooldown. A bit long, but it can be serviceable. So yeah, he's not bad at all. Now, same faction is Skeuramis. Now, I think this is less one that's underrated and more one that kind of slipped past radar for a lot of people who weren't paying attention, because he's actually got a pretty decent level of utility. First off is this, which it doesn't place a hit, so it won't trigger counterattacks, it can't weak hit, and it can go through Hydra's Poison Cloud, although the counterattack on this skill means that be a little bit careful with this, because if Mischief steals that and spreads it, you're in a lot of trouble. And now you can say, oh, but I'll have blocked buffs up. What if you don't? What then? So there is that. Then he also has a decreed attack, which this isn't 100% chance. This is 75 at most. But if there's some buffs on the dungeon wave or whatever, he takes them off them, or at least reduces them by a turn, and then basically gets an extra turn. And finally, you have this is pretty good and meant to be used with a counterattack, but also has a 30% chance of stun. Now, I wouldn't say he's your first choice of a 60. None of these are. They're more just side options for if you're a bit stuck on something. But this is one of the better ones in that regard. HP, speed, some accuracy because everything he does involves accuracy, and you can potentially give him crit if you want, because this with these counterattacks can add up, but it's not your first priority again. So next is going to be Sanguinia. Now Sanguinia is mostly because there is a very awkward stage in Plague Home, I'll put it on screen for you, where both bosses will quite literally vomit poisons all over your team, and if you don't have a cleanser, then you can be in quite a lot of trouble here. But fortunately for you, there is this. It will take all buffs at everyone else on your team, or all debuffs. It will try to throw all debuffs that are on her onto the enemy, but if she gets resisted, then it still takes them off her. And this skill is pretty good on a 3-turn cooldown, and all I'll say about this is, if you are using her in that stage, try not to hit Nether Spider itself with this, because all that does is put poisons on her, which may end up getting her killed at some point. So there's that. Apart from that, her use is pretty limited, more so than the others, I would say. Or maybe not Azure. But if you need someone who you just put to 50 in some speed and some durability, then she'll help you get through that stage pretty handily. So moving on is going to be Woad-Painted. Woad-Painted, as they say. Now, this champion was buffed a while ago. I think a lot of people just forgot, because one of the epic buffs it did was pretty good, and the other one was usually some complete waste of effort, and eventually they saw people still were using champions like Necro Hunter, because a attack champ with no utility and no damage is just flattened, making him have 0.1 extra attack scaling. 0.1 extra attack scaling is not going to fix that. But Woad-Painted actually got a very decent upgrade to this, which now does 5 lines worth of text, and all of it is as good as the rest. So again, lots of HP, lots of speed, she'll full heal herself and your team, and reflect damage is great for Fire Knight, especially since there is at least one rotation of Soul Cross Tainted Pyro where you are restricted to using green barbarians, and she's very helpful there. She even has a double hit on her A1, so that's even more. This is whatever. You're not building accuracy on her. Resist maybe, but not accuracy. Right, moving on to Hugo. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's Siegehulk. Now, Ogre and Tribes is still not having the best of times. There was a reason why Vizug the Noxious was kind of a flop, because the faction is when two of your most impactful champs to most players are Hugo and Maneater, epics, you're in a pretty bad spot. Like, sure, I know there's Azure, I know there's Gizmak, there's whoever this guy is, but apart from that, they're suffering a bit. Now, there is one specific stage again in Curse City, Spray Bottle, where he is actually, I'd say, the overall best option there, because you are limited to epics and rares, and you see here, yeah, if you put him in really good gear and you have a 6-star soul, you just wreck every single wave, and it's apparently not even close. Now, speaking of souls, obviously for anything that's not a completely trash epic, if you get a 5 or a 6-star from out of a soulstone, just keep it. It's not like how if you get 6-star from mythical, then you might as well just sell it if you're a low spender or free to play, because you're probably never going to pull that champ, and you might as well just get 2 eternal soulstones and hope for the best. Although you could hold on to it, there's no right or wrong way to do that. But anyway, so this is just 2 things you'd like in terms of just laying waste to a wave. This apparently hits pretty decently, and this is, I don't know why this is conditional, I think this is just do 15% regardless, but yeah. And overall, Ogre and Tribes has so few attack champions that really do a whole lot, especially in the epic slot, but he may just find his way onto your faction wars team, or that one awkward Doomsire secret room, so he's got that going for him. Also, he's too big to even fit on the window. Okay, moving on, and we're going all the way over to Orcs. Now again, this is one that I think people just have forgotten more than anything else because he's another support, and in raid support legends, it's really hard to be a bad support champion. Unless you pick Siegehulk, which in that case... Ha! So he's got this and this. Both of these are really good, especially when there is Soul Cross 6, which is epics and rares, I believe, blue affinity only, and ogre, these are orcs. And then there's also the Nether Spider and Tainted Ice Golem stage later on in Soul Cross. Wait, if you don't have Elva Autumnborn like me, it's actually kind of tricky because there's a bunch of debuffs thrown on you, and you don't really have too much in the way of a cleanser. So him having a heal and a shield, and I put him in bolster set, and this actually ends up being handy. You'll take any damage reduction percentage you can get at that point, and yeah, and again, he looks pretty cool. Not as much as this guy, who seems to be in the wrong rarity, but yeah, as a Trumborr, he's not like underrated. I've forgotten he's actually pretty good. Anyway, now moving on, you're probably going to be thinking I'm trying with this one, but you saw it in a thumbnail, so you're not surprised. And it's Scion. Now, Scion was made as the original enchitification for locking rewards. Instead of getting a 5-star chicken and a sacred shard, you get fragments towards some epic legendary you may or may never use, and he was the first one of it. Now, the skin, again, looks really, really cool, but that's kind of where his positives end for a lot of things. But I was using him for one one Curse City Amias rotation, spray bottle again, where there is very, very few heal reduction champions available, so I went for Scion because he was an epic and not a legendary. And he actually did the job. I've got a video of it somewhere deep in my channel, but it's not the most fascinating thing in the world, so if you don't want to watch it, then that's fine. I can't walk to your house and make you watch myself beat MIS way too slowly compared to what there is nowadays. Now, I also used this because it'd be the only buffs on my team when he would change form and flip buffs into debuffs. And I had Duchess, so I could survive most things from there on, and the one time he'd use the A1 because obviously Duchess is very tanky. But one thing I want to say about this guy that's kind of funny is his passive. Got it memorized? Right, let's go all the way to Bannerlords and Archmage Helmet. Yeah, no conditions. He's just like that all the time. So yeah, hooray for reverse power creep, am I right? But yeah, apart from that, if you really need the heal reduction, I would not really say to use this guy elsewhere. But he does look pretty good, let's be honest. He's one epic I want them to buff at some point, just purely so I have an excuse to use him. But they don't buff epics anymore. In fact, they barely buff legendaries. They do 2 months. They could do much more than that, but they're lazy. Right, moving on all the way over to Night Revenants. Now, this is a champion I just don't see enough of, and I really like her as a champion. She doesn't hit the hardest of any epic. I know that he'll say some hit harder than legendary supports, maybe. But this skill works with her passive and makes it so that this basically reads as decreased defense, then 50% chance of hex on the same skill. Another AoE and a 3-turn cooldown, and then this, which is pretty good if there's poisons on them. HP burn is something else that you missed on one champ because of 3% resist or something. Now, she is quite squishy, and if you don't have a good soul for her, I can't really recommend her too much. I also can't really recommend her in places where you're allowed to use Dark Elves legendaries, because Marinix is basically a big version of her, and Marinix is also basically a red version of the current Fusion legendary, who not many people have nice words to say about him, not including myself if you saw the, well, skip grid. But yeah, Thylessia is great, and if you get a good soul for her, then you'll like her quite a lot. Now, speaking of souls, we are going to go over to Fenshi, and he is someone who really, really likes Phantom Touch. because there's a Soul Cross double boss, which is Tainted Fire Knight and Frostbiter, and you're only allowed Red Shadowkin, Demon Spawn, and some other faction. And because he's Shadowkin, he works really well with Lady Mikage. Now, honestly, if you don't have Lady Mikage, you're probably early enough in the game, or unlucky enough, that you're not going to get to that point in Soul Cross anyway. But Trouble hit here, give him Phantom Touch, and you'll chop a bunch of holes through Finite Shield and let your team do all the rest. In terms of damage, don't bother with it too much, just make him as fast as you can, some accuracy so he can place his decreased speed, and maybe with poisons if his shield's down. I put him to about 360 speed, because I did the Soul Cross stages during free gear removal, and I just put Shuzen's gear on him. And you can use him for regular Fire Knight as progression, but apart from that, again, he's going to go pretty widely unused. Now, for all of these epics, apart from Thylessia, who you're going to be using as general gameplay, I wouldn't give him masteries. Booking, obviously, because epic books are basically a waste product after a certain point, but not masteries. You have better use for your energy. Like, sure, give them the white scrolls to fix their crit rate or accuracy slightly, but yeah. And then the last is going to be one that, again, people have kind of forgotten about or didn't know existed, and that's her. Now, this is fine. This is kind of like some experimental thing that doesn't do a whole lot. But the main thing is this, and this is for Sun Devil, and I will have a Sun Devil run which shows you exactly where I use her and why I use her, and I'll put the speeds in the Q&A for you. Now, unlike Siphi, this can 3% resist, so you are going to die 3% of the time, and there is not much you can do about it. But, and especially with increased accuracy, the stat requirement is pretty low to do so, and you can use her in place of any other 100% sleep, especially since she's Void Affinity. And it also means that you're not wasting books on Adeline the Chronicler. It's kind of funny how I've made her a champion and then nerfed Sun Devil in a way, so yeah. Even less people benefit from her now, and to harp on about 10 more seconds about that champion who I've still not leveled at all. You're making a lock-in legendary that's designed for newer players, when newer players shouldn't even be going to Sun Devil for anything apart from Mariah's missions, which they are not going to reach for a long time. So there's that. Anyway, that's 10 epics that are either underrated or forgotten about, and if there are any now that you thought, oh, actually, yeah, sure, I'll use that, then there you go, you've gotten something out of this. If you haven't, then, well, thanks for listening to myself hop on anyway. Right, I'm done. See ya.